This was Tsukasa's best chapter in Dr. Stone. We got some great character growth and a perfect ending to his character arc. Not that he's all done for now, but we can safely say at this point Tsukasa is a fully fleshed out character. Unfortunately, some people didn't see it that way. Some people saw this as Inagaki's newest plan to ruin Dr. Stone. Hopefully you can tell I'm being ridiculous on purpose because that's just how silly it is to think this is bad writing. That's why, in case you still need some persuading, I'm gonna explain why Kohaku was a great pick for the Moon team, and how this does justice to Tsukasa's character. Be warned that this will contain spoilers. Before I get started, make sure to comment with your thoughts on this decision. I'll pick my favorite and share it as comment of the week in the next video. This week's comment goes to Itadaki Mango for sharing their thoughts on Dr. Stone's art. If you'd like more Dr. Stone and other manga discussions like this one, then make sure to subscribe and follow along with each week's video. So to get started, let's just set the scene. We've been told at least twice that if there was a Moon team, Tsukasa was gonna be on it. Which only makes sense. I mean, when you caught a legendary that's like 20 levels ahead of your team in Pokemon, you didn't just put it away before the Elite Four, you used it. Well, most of us did, anyway. Point being, it's generally a good idea to carry around the strongest human being on the planet. Plus, like I said in at least 2 videos now, there's a bunch of reasons Tsukasa should have gone to the Moon. As someone who fought against science, it would have been perfect if he went with Senku and told Y-Man that the Kingdom of Science will save the world, or something along those lines. But as we all know, it's not happening. In Chapter 219, Tsukasa sees how much Kohaku has grown as a warrior and decides to have her go in his place. Now, like I said, most people loved this. I mean, come on, it's Kohaku. How unbelievably hype is it that the first villager we met is going to the Moon? But of course, some people hated this decision, and for them it had a sort of two-pronged effect. People who don't like this will either say it goes against what we were told in 141, or it was a rushed call in an era of the story that already feels rushed. Now, to be fair, yes, it is generally a good thing to build up to plot points. And while the comment from Zeno here was certainly a nice hint, it's far from what most people would call build-up. So if you were disappointed because of these expectations, then that's okay. You, the reader, decide what to get excited about, so you have every right to be disappointed. But if you think this is bad writing, then I'm sorry, but you're just plain wrong. Like, when have you ever watched a TV show where they make all these plans and go out of their way to tell you everything is gonna go according to plan, and have just been like, yes, I believe the characters because they said so. I seriously hope you don't, because that's just not what happens. The fact that they kept telling us what the team was gonna look like should have been a giant neon sign that said, hey, stupid, there's gonna be a twist. So if anything, it's not necessarily good or bad writing, it's just a twist. Oh, okay, but what about the rush decision? Well, like I said, the Zeno comic certainly wasn't build-up, but it is a hint. Plus, I mean, come on, did it really never occur to you that Kohaku, someone compared to Tsukasa and Hyoga, might go up to space? It didn't matter whether Inagaki spent time considering her as a candidate because most of us were already there mentally at some point. She's been around for a long time, and she's one of the best fighters. So by the time Tsukasa makes his decision, most of us have already considered her as a candidate. Plus, there's a bunch of other characters people were predicting would go that I suspect nobody would make a fuss about, so I'm definitely calling baloney on this one. Actually, speaking of baloney, there are some people who claim that this is bad writing because the sole reason Tsukasa was revived was to be on the space team. That is just the worst Dr. Stone take I've ever heard. Like, there are a million other reasons they revived Tsukasa. If you say this is the only reason, then you're just flat out lying to yourself. But moving away from all the BS, Tsukasa gives a great explanation for why Kohaku is the better option. She's lighter, meaning the ship will have less weight, plus she can jump around. And if you've played Super Mario Galaxy, then you know jumping is the #1 most crucial ability in outer space. So could this ultimately have been done better? Probably. But was it bad writing? Absolutely not. In fact, there's a bunch of reasons why this scenario is actually better. I know in my other videos I said this would be great for Tsukasa's character arc, but what he did kinda completes it. His whole thing started out because of the power gap in society, and in his life Tsukasa came to believe that the only way to close that gap was through power, which is the big picture question we were faced with for almost half the story. Fast forward to when we take the world's beefiest nugget out of the freezer and Tsukasa tells us that he's learned his lesson. He says that now he's only there to prevent the misuse of science before it happens. Which, when you think about it, is a pretty big leap. I mean, think about that anime-only speech he gave. He literally comes right out and says he was playing God. So to go from God to bodyguard is a pretty big demotion in responsibility. This all builds up to his near-death experience when he starts thinking about how Senku will save him and realizes he's completely given into science. This is supplemented by a double spread panel of a itsy bitsy teeny tiny Tsukasa in the corner of what looks like a endless sky filled with planets and stars. It's all meant to show us that Tsukasa has grown from thinking he has to become a god on Earth just to save the world, to realizing he can just trust the decisions of people like Senku, who want nothing more than to use science for good instead of evil. And if I still haven't convinced you, just look at what he says to Kohaku. Tsukasa says that Kohaku has closed the gap thanks to the weapons of science. Then he says that science is the great equalizer. Like, come on. How more in your face could you get? Tsukasa is literally coming right out and telling readers that he now understands that science is the way to close that gap. That same gap that made Tsukasa so disillusioned in the first place. He sees that power isn't the answer, and that he, as the symbol of power, needs to take the back seat if this new, better world is ever going to work out. This is exactly why he takes the back seat and gives his job to the next generation. Now, before I close out the video, I still need to talk about why Kohaku was a great choice. Because in theory, Tsukasa could have just as easily picked Ginro or Yo and it still would have had the same effect on his character. But Kohaku going up to space actually creates a ton of potential for her character arc. As we all know, our girl is just a teensy-weensy bit stubborn. She prefers to take matters into her own hands and tends to fight before thinking things out. But over the course of Dr. Stone, this has changed. Tsukasa, who she thought was a cold-blooded murderer, turned out to be fighting for his sister, which, oh my god, that's what Kohaku was doing. So when Tsukasa's backstory is revealed and she sees how nice he is, Kohaku sees that her first impression of him was clearly off the mark. She realizes, even just if a little bit, that there's more to people than meets the eye. Fast forward to the Y-Man battle where we will 100% have a talk no jutsu with one of the most morally gray villains in all of manga, and this will be the perfect opportunity for Kohaku to be less stubborn, less quick to fight a villain. Or, you know, she decks him in the schnoz and we all have a good laugh. Point being that there is that potential for Kohaku whether or not Inagaki decides to follow through with it. And like I said, this does wonders for Tsukasa's character. Of course, if nothing changes, there's also the possibility that Tsukasa will be doing nothing in this final arc. But I know I'm not alone when I say there's most definitely gonna be some big twist where there's a crisis on Earth, and Tsukasa will of course help to solve that problem. So for now, I wouldn't be worried. In any event, not only was this a great moment for Tsukasa, but as I'm sure you'll all agree, this will probably end up being one of the smartest writing choices Inagaki will ever make in Dr. Stone. And that's it for this discussion. If you enjoyed this discussion, then make sure to like the video. Also make sure to comment with your thoughts down below. And if you'd like more Dr. Stone and other manga discussions like this one, then make sure to subscribe and follow along with each week's video. Thank you for watching, and I hope to hear from you soon.